Eric, it's not who we thought. It's not him. Whatever you do, Eric, do not come to the house. Stay where you are. Don't come here. That was the end. 14 seconds of a panicked whisper that would haunt Eric's every waking hour. It was the last time he would ever hear his twin sister Erica's voice. A call that defied logic, and a warning that arrived far too late. Welcome back. Today, we are unraveling a case that challenges everything we know about digital forensics and the biological bond between twins. How does a phone that has been physically destroyed make an outgoing call? How does a woman, trapped in her final moments of freedom, use her last breath to tell her only protector to stay away? We are looking at the case of Eric and Erica, twins who shared everything, including a nightmare that no one saw coming. This isn't just a disappearance, it's a puzzle of nonsensical clues, hidden rooms, and a voice that shouldn't exist. Make sure you stay with me until the 25-minute mark, because the evidence found behind a grandfather clock changes the entire context of that last phone call. This is a story of obsession, shadows, and the call that makes no sense. To understand the tragedy of November 14th, you have to understand Eric and Erica. They weren't just siblings, they were mirror twins. If Eric fell, Erica felt the phantom pain. They lived in separate apartments, but their lives were a synchronized clock. Every morning at 7 a.m., a text. Every evening at 9 p.m., a phone call. Erica was a high school history teacher, the anchor of the family. She was the type of person who double-checked the stove and triple-locked her front door every single night. She didn't have enemies. She didn't take risks. She lived a life of quiet, predictable safety. But that Tuesday, the rhythm broke. 9 p.m. came and went. Eric sat on his sofa, phone in hand, watching the minutes tick by. 9:10, 9:20, 9:30. Erica never missed the 9 p.m. call. It was their sacred rule. He called her 5 times, but it went straight to a full mailbox. A cold pit began to form in his stomach. He knew something was wrong. His twin sense wasn't just tingling, it was screaming. At exactly 9:42 p.m., Eric's phone finally buzzed. It wasn't a call, it was a notification for a 3-second voicemail. When he played it, there were no words, just a heavy, mechanical, rhythmic sound. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It was the sound of an ancient grandfather clock. Eric felt a chill crawl up his spine because he knew for a fact that his sister didn't own a clock like that. She hated them. She said the ticking made her anxious. So where was she? He redialed her number frantically. On the 10th attempt, the line clicked open. "Erica?" he shouted. The voice on the other end was calm, unnervingly calm. She said, "Eric, I ran out of gas. I'm at the station on 5th. But as she spoke, Eric heard it again in the background, that heavy brass tick-tock. He knew the station on 5th didn't have a clock. He knew she was lying, and he knew she was lying because someone was watching her. Think about this for a second. If you found your sibling's phone smashed on the floor, but you had just spoken to them on that very same number 5 minutes earlier, what would your first thought be? Would you think it was a prank, or would you realize you were talking to something or someone else? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a glitch with technology that felt like it came from another world. Seriously, drop your best theories below, because what we found next defies all logic. Eric didn't wait for her to finish. He drove like a madman to her apartment. When he arrived, his worst fears were realized. The front door, the Erica triple locked, was standing wide open. He stepped inside, heart hammering against his ribs, calling her name. No answer. The only sound was the shrill, lonely whistle of a tea kettle in the kitchen. The tea was still steaming. Her car keys were still on the marble island. And then he saw it. In the center of the living room rug lay Erica's smartphone. It hadn't just been dropped, it had been pulverized. The screen was a spiderweb of black glass, and the internal battery was bent in half. It was physically, scientifically impossible for that phone to have made a call to Eric 10 minutes ago. And yet there it was on his screen. Incoming call, Erica, 9:42 p.m. Within minutes of finding that pulverized phone, Eric was on the line with 911. His voice was shaking so hard the operator could barely understand him. By the time the first patrol car pulled up to the curb, Eric was pacing the sidewalk, clutching his own phone like a lifeline. He showed the officers the call log. He played the voicemail with the rhythmic tick-tock of a clock that didn't exist. The lead officer, a veteran named Miller, took one look at the smashed phone on the living room rug and called for forensics. "No one makes a call on a phone with a bifurcated battery, kid," Miller said. But as they began to sweep the apartment, the confusion only deepened. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture, just that whistling kettle and a half-made cup of Earl Grey tea. It was as if Erica had simply been deleted from reality mid-sentence. While forensics dusted the kitchen for prints, Officer Miller walked across the street to the neighbor's house, a modern place equipped with a high-definition doorbell camera.
We just need to see if she walked out on her own, Miller told Eric. They huddled around a small tablet screen to watch the playback from 9:40 p.m., 2 minutes before the nonsensical call. At first, the street looked empty. Then at 9:41, the front door of Erica's apartment swung open. A figure stepped out. It was wearing Erica's favorite yellow raincoat and her signature wide-brimmed hat. It even walked with that slight, hurried limp Erica had developed after a childhood hiking accident. Eric almost sighed with relief, thinking his sister had just left and was safe. But then the figure stopped under the street lamp. As the figure stood under the light, Eric's blood turned to ice. The person in the yellow coat was tall, far too tall. Erica was 5'4". This person towered over the nearby mailbox, standing at least 6'2". And as the figure turned its head toward the camera, the motion was jerky, unnatural, like a marionette being pulled by invisible strings. Under the brim of the hat, there was no face, just a smooth, pale surface that reflected the street lamp's glow. No eyes, no mouth, no features. Yet this faceless entity reached into the pocket of the yellow raincoat and pulled out a phone. It held the device to where its ear should have been. On the tablet screen, the timestamp hit 9:42 p.m., the exact second Eric's phone had started to ring. Stop and think about the sheer terror of that moment. You're watching a video of someone who looks exactly like your sister from the neck down, but is physically impossible from the neck up, and they are making a call from a phone you know is currently sitting in pieces on your floor. If you saw a double of your loved one on a security camera, but something was off, would you stay in that house or run as far away as possible? Type stay or run in the comments right now. I need to know how you'd react, because what Eric did next nearly cost him his life. After seeing that faceless figure on the monitor, Officer Miller didn't wait. He called for a full-scale search of the perimeter, but Eric couldn't move. He went back inside the apartment, his eyes fixed on the one object that had haunted the voicemail, the sound of the ticking clock. He realized that while his sister didn't own a grandfather clock, her neighbor in 4B did, a massive, ancient mahogany piece that sat directly against the shared wall of their living rooms. Eric pressed his ear to the drywall. The ticking wasn't coming from the neighbor's side, it was coming from inside the wall. He grabbed a heavy kitchen chair and swung. The first hit cracked a plaster, the second revealed a hollow void. There, nestled between the studs of the wall, was a narrow, vertical space that shouldn't have existed according to the building's blueprints. And sitting at the bottom of that dark shaft was an old, brass-faced grandfather clock, whose pendulum swinging with a slow, mocking rhythm. Miller rushed in, weapon drawn, but the space was empty of people. As the light from his tactical flashlight cut through the cobwebs, they saw it. The clock wasn't just sitting there, it was a door. The back of the clock had been removed, leading into a series of cross spaces that snacked throughout the entire apartment complex. On the floor of the cross space lay a small, crumpled piece of notebook paper. Eric picked it up with trembling fingers. It was Erica's handwriting, but it was jagged, written in total darkness. It read, "He's not outside. He's in the walls. He's been here the whole time. He's using my voice. If you hear me, it's not me." Below the text was a draft timestamp from a secondary phone, 9:40 p.m., 2 minutes before the call. Eric realized with a jolt of pure horror that the Erica he spoke to at the gas station wasn't his sister using a trick. It was the intruder using a voice modulator to lure into the house. This is the moment the case shifted from a disappearance to something far more calculated. This intruder wasn't just a squatter, he was a mimic. He had built a life inside the very walls where Erica slept, ate, and dressed. If you discovered a secret room in your home that wasn't on the floor plan, would you call the police immediately, or would you grab a weapon and investigate it yourself? I want to know how many of you are investigators and how many are survivors. As the police began to shine their lights into the ventilation shafts, they heard it. A soft, melodic whistling coming from deep within the building's infrastructure. It was the same tune Erica used to hum when she was happy. But as the sound moved further away, it was joined by a second voice, a deep, distorted version of Eric's own voice, laughing. Erica is still missing, a faceless double on the loose, and Eric standing in a house that has literally been turned against him.
The whistling stopped the moment the police breached the ventilation shafts, but the silence that followed was even more terrifying. Officer Miller knew they weren't chasing a ghost, they were chasing a man who knew the skeletal structure of this building better than the architects themselves. He called in the tech unit. Within 20 minutes, the hallway was filled with the hum of thermal imaging cameras. On the glowing blue screens of the handheld monitors, the apartment looked like a ghost map. Cold blue walls, warm yellow pipes, and then a pulse, a bright orange-red bloom of heat moving behind the drywall of the master bedroom. It wasn't a rat. It was the heat signature of a full-grown human being curled into a fetal position in a space no wider than 18 inches. "He's right there," Miller whispered, pointing to a spot just behind Erica's headboard. "He's been watching us this entire time." They didn't use a chair this time. The SWAT team used a battering ram, punching a hole through the drywall. What they found wasn't just a crawl space, it was a nest. It was a central hub located in the dead space between Erica's unit and the neighboring apartment. It was carpeted with stolen towels to muffle footsteps. There was a small, battery-operated monitor hooked up to hidden pinhole cameras in every room of Erica's home. Eric stood in the doorway, nauseous, as he realized that for the last 2 years, his sister had never truly been alone. Every private moment, every phone call, every night she spent sleeping, someone was inches away, watching her through a hole no bigger than a needle. But the most chilling part wasn't the cameras, it was the audio equipment. On a makeshift shelf made of stolen textbooks, police found rows of microcassette tapes. Each one was labeled with a date and a name, Eric or Erica. Miller pressed play on one from 6 months ago. It was a recording of the twins' 9 p.m. call. Then, the audio changed. A man's voice, flat and mechanical, began to repeat Erica's words over and over, trying to match her pitch, her inflection, her stutter. It was a rehearsal. This intruder wasn't just stalking her, he was becoming her. He had been learning to mimic their voices so perfectly that even a twin's intuition could be bypassed. This explained the nonsensical call. It wasn't Erica talking to Eric from a gas station. It was the man in the nest, playing back a pre-recorded, modulated version of her voice to lure Eric into the house while he moved Erica through the internal shafts of the building. Think about the level of dedication it takes to spend years practicing someone's voice just to deceive their own family. This is a level of obsession that goes beyond a typical stalker. If you received a call from your best friend or sibling right now, and they sounded just a little too perfect, would you be able to tell it was an AI or a mimic? Or is there a secret code word only you and your family know? Tell me your security word story in the comments. Don't share the word itself, obviously, but let me know if you have one. Because as the police dug deeper into the tapes, they found one labeled with today's date, and it didn't have Erica's name on it. It had Eric's. As the forensic teams continued to pull microcassettes from the hidden nest, Eric sat on the cold concrete of the curb outside. The blue and red police lights rhythmically painted his face, but he didn't see them. He was staring at his hands, thinking about that one specific tape labeled with his own name. Why was the intruder practicing his voice? He began to dig through the layers of his memory, back to a time before the city, before the teaching jobs, back to their childhood in the rural outskirts. He remembered a period when they were 6 years old, a summer that felt endless. Erica had an imaginary friend she called the Shadow Brother. At the time, their parents laughed it off, calling it a creative phase, a way for twins to process the world. But Eric remembered the nights he spent lying awake, feeling a third presence in the room. He remembered looking into the hallway mirror at night and seeing 3 small reflections instead of 2. He realized now that it wasn't a ghost. It was a local boy named Julian who lived 3 houses down, a boy who had vanished the same year their imaginary games ended. Julian had been a silent, pale child who was often found standing at their garden fence, perfectly still, just watching. He wasn't playing with them, he was studying them. Inside the apartment, Officer Miller was shouting into his radio. He had just run the name Julian Vane through the national database, and the results were enough to turn anyone's stomach. Julian hadn't just moved away 20 years ago. He had spent the better part of his adult life in and out of high-security psychiatric facilities. The diagnosis? A rare and severe form of identity displacement. Julian didn't just want to be Eric or Erica. He believed with a religious fervor that he was the missing piece of their set. He believed he was the third twin that nature had forgotten to create. He had been released 18 months ago, and the paper trail showed he used a massive inheritance to buy the unit directly adjacent to Erica's under a fake shell company. He didn't move in to live there, he moved in to renovate. He spent a year carving out the nest, installing the pinhole cameras, and weaving himself into the very fabric of Erica's daily existence. He was the creak in her floorboards. He was the shadow in her peripheral vision. He was the architect of a life that never was his to live. Stop for a moment and put yourself in Eric's shoes. Imagine realizing that your entire life, your voice, your habits, your private conversations has been recorded and rehearsed by someone who wants to replace you. This is a level of obsession that defies human understanding. Julian didn't want to kill the twins. He wanted to become the twins. He wanted to step into Eric's shoes and live his life so perfectly that even their own mother wouldn't know the difference. I want to ask you right now, if someone had been studying you for decades, what is the one thing they would never be able to get right? Is it a specific scar, a secret memory from when you were 5, a unique way you laugh? Let me know in the comments, what is the one flaw in your double that would give them away? Because as we're about to see, Julian had forgotten one very important detail about the twins' childhood that was about to change everything. A radio squawk shattered the tension. We have visual. Erica's vehicle spotted heading north on Highway 9. Driver is wearing a yellow raincoat. Eric didn't wait for Miller's orders. He didn't care about police procedure. He sprinted to his truck, the engine roaring to life with a violent growl. He knew exactly where Julian was going. There was only one place where the third twin would feel complete: the Blackwood property, their abandoned childhood home, a place of rotting wood and forgotten secrets. As Eric sped down the foggy 2-lane highway, the speedometer climbing past 80, his phone began to vibrate in the cup holder. He glanced down, expecting to see Miller's name, but his heart nearly stopped. The caller ID didn't say Miller. It didn't say Erica. It said me. He was receiving an incoming call from his own phone number. With a trembling hand, he answered. There was no voice on the other end, just the sound of a car engine, his own engine, echoing back at him through the speaker, delayed by exactly 3 seconds. Julian wasn't just following him. Julian was inside his digital frequency. The gravel of the old Blackwood driveway didn't crunch, it screamed under the weight of Eric's truck. This was a place left to the rot, a skeletal remains of a childhood that had ended too abruptly. Eric stepped out into the freezing night, his breath hitching in his chest. He didn't wait for the distant sirens. He didn't wait for the law. He drew a heavy iron flashlight, its beam cutting through the fog like a blade. The front door was slightly ajar, whining on rusted hinges as the wind pushed it inward. Inside, the house smelled of damp cedar and something else, something sweet, like old perfume. Erica's perfume. Eric's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he moved through the foyer. He passed the marks on the wall where their heights had been measured as children, and then he heard it, a soft, melodic humming coming from beneath the floorboards. It was a lullaby their mother used to sing, but the voice, it was a perfect, sickening replica of his own voice. He realized then that the third twin wasn't just in the house, he was under it. Eric lunged for the heavy oak cellar hatch, ripping it open with a roar of pure, desperate adrenaline. Descending those stone steps felt like descending into a grave. The air in the cellar was stagnant, frozen in time. At the far end of the room, seated in a rusted folding chair under a single flickering bulb, was a man. He was wearing Eric's favorite flannel shirt, the one that had gone missing 3 months ago. He had Eric's hair, Eric's posture, even the same silver watch on his left wrist. When the man turned, the light hit his face and Eric nearly collapsed. It was like looking into a cursed mirror. Julian Vane had transformed himself. He had used prosthetic wax to build up his jawline, colored contacts to match Eric's hazel eyes, and a lifetime of obsession to master every micro-expression. Julian didn't reach for a gun. He reached for a small, high-end audio speaker. He pressed a button, and Erica's voice filled the room. "Eric, help me. It's cold." But the lips of the man in the chair didn't move. He just smiled, a jagged, terrifying grin, and spoke in Eric's voice. "Do you like it, brother? I've spent 20 years practicing to be you. I know your secrets. I know your fears. And tonight, I take your place." "Where is she?" Eric screamed, lunging forward. Julian just laughed, a sound that harmonized with the ticking of an ancient grandfather clock standing in the corner. That's when the nonsensical call finally clicked. Eric remembered the 14-second voicemail, the rhythmic, grinding thud in the background. It wasn't static, it was the sound of the old, faulty sump pump in this specific cellar, a sound only someone who lived here would recognize.
Erica hadn't been talking to him. She had held the phone against the metal discharge pipe. She knew Eric would hear the heartbeat of their childhood home. She had left him a sonic map. Eric didn't engage with Julian. He dove for the heavy rug near the clock, ripping it back to reveal a concealed fruit cellar. He smashed the padlock with his flashlight and threw the door open. There, huddled in the dark, was Erica. She was shivering, her eyes wide with a terror so deep it looked like madness. She grabbed Eric's hand, but she wasn't looking at him. She was looking over his shoulder at the man in the chair who had stood up and was now holding a flare. The fire took the Blackwood cabin in less than 20 minutes. Eric and Erica barely made it to the tree line before the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. When the fire marshal sifted through the ashes the next morning, they found the chair, they found the audio equipment, they even found the charred remains of the yellow raincoat, but they never found a body. No bones, no DNA, no sign that Julian Vane had died in the inferno. He had vanished into the network of old mining tunnels that honeycombed the earth beneath the property. Today, Eric and Erica live in a city 3,000 miles away, under names they won't even tell their closest friends. But technology has a long memory. Every year, on November 14th, at exactly 9:42 p.m., Eric's phone vibrates. He has changed his number 12 times, but it doesn't matter. The caller ID always says, "Me." He never answers. He knows that on the other end is a man who sounds exactly like him, waiting for the one day the real Eric stops looking in the mirror. Because in the world of digital shadows, once someone has your voice, they never truly let go.